Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 167 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix. Please send your questions to ask@nonmonogamyhelp.com, and they'll either be in the podcast or the column anonymously. If you want to read everything and listen to all the podcasts, you can go to nonmonogamy.help. Sign up to the early emails that I send out on Wednesdays by going to nonmonogamyhelp.com/email. And you can follow the column and podcast on Instagram at nonmonogamyhelp and on TikTok at nonmonohelp. If you want to join the podcast shout-out support tier, that is really super helpful, and I will read your name at the end of the podcast. You can do that by going to nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe. Let's get to this week's discussion question. If this is the first time you're hearing an episode every week, before I read the letter, I put forth a discussion question that you can use with your friends, partners, and anyone to get to know them a little bit more. And this week's discussion question is, again, a polyamory conversation card from Otter Being. And these are super helpful, and they make it easier for me to not have to come up with a discussion question every week. But they also contain lots of really interesting things that you can ask your partners. You can get them at nonmonogamyhelp.com/cards, and you can get 10% off using non-monohelp at checkout. So this week's discussion question is, who gets a say in life decisions that influence multiple relationships, such as pregnancies or moving to a different country? This is interesting because I am solo polyam, relationship anarchist. I don't really have an interest in cohabitation, children, or any type of situation where this would be a thing that would my decisions would influence other people, and I'm kind of aware of that. But yeah, I don't think that it would necessarily be something that is similar to a lot of people in more, physically together relationships and things like that. So I get a say in my life decisions. And that's one of the reasons why I like being solo polyam, is because I am my own primary partner. And I think that's really good for me, especially at this point in my life. And yeah, if I decided that I wanted to move to a different country, and I did. And if I wanted to move to another country for some reason, I can decide that. And I am no interest in pregnancy, but something like that, I can decide that. So that's what I really enjoy about my particular situation, but that's not necessarily everybody else's situation. So maybe this question is far more interesting for you. Who gets a say in life decisions that influence multiple relationships, such as pregnancies or moving to a different country? Let's get to this week's question. For background context, I'm a 55-year-old man who has been married to a 52-year-old woman for 2 years, and I knew my partner identified as polyam before we married. We'd been in a relationship for 6 years already, and she was in a relationship with my best friend for almost all of that time. So our story started, as I suspect many do, when my then girlfriend of 5 months invited a long-term male friend of mine to have threesomes with us. He lives in a different country, so we only see him about a week a year. I had only been in monogamous relationships until then and had never heard of polyam, although I had heard of people being open or swinging. It quickly became apparent that they had a more intense emotional connection than I had with my girlfriend. She confirmed this herself. I felt jealous when they started asking to have sex separately from me, and when I explained that this wasn't the dynamic I wanted, I was told, but there are 4 relationships here, A and B, B and C, C and A and B, B and C. We're polyamorous. This was a bolt from the blue to me, as I only believed that there was A and B, B and C. I hadn't signed up to her having a separate relationship with him. I was only interested in the group sex dynamic. However, to avoid losing either both of my long-term friend, I'd known him for decades, or girlfriend, I went along with it, but it's never sat easily with me, and it's caused many, many arguments between my now wife and I. Over the years, they've pushed the boundary further and further away from the original three-way thing into a series of separate dyads, first insisting that they sleep together while I'm in the other room, then arranging time together where I was specifically not invited. Last year, we went on holiday together, and they decided I felt I couldn't say no, that they wanted to hang out together for the afternoon, and made it clear that I wasn't invited. This wasn't so that they could be intimate. I've always said that they should take time out for that. No, this was just to hang out. Seeing as we were already hanging out as all 3 of us, and apparently very happily, this felt exclusionary and simply rude. Frankly, it ruined the holiday for me. This year they're planning a week-long holiday without me, and it's killing me. While I'm comfortable with the concept of polyamory, This just doesn't seem equitable for several reasons. I spend most of the year with my wife. As I said, he lives a considerable distance away, where intimacy, affectionate touch, and sex don't feature very often between my wife and I. Yet when I see her with him, she becomes a different person, very sexual, once if not twice or more a day, constantly snuggling and cuddling him, being really affectionate. This is really killing my self-esteem, and I feel like I'm the comfy pair of slippers in this relationship, and he's the fun and exciting one. I've raised the obvious disparity numerous times to try and see if we can improve the connection between us, but this often leads to massively destructive arguments, which just pushes us further apart. But I know that addressing the disparity in connection and improving communication are critical if I'm too so feeling left out. This has been going on for years. When she asked me to marry her, I took that to mean I'd be her primary partner. I know hierarchy isn't always seen as ethical, but I know that that's what I need in a relationship. I feel like they are hell-bent on getting all their needs met, even knowing that doing so is going way beyond a place where I feel comfortable. Whenever I ask if we can discuss this and negotiate a dynamic where everyone compromises a bit so that everyone feels comfy, I get told I'm being controlling. But from my perspective, this feels like they're coercing me to accept a dynamic that I never agreed to and never wanted. Basically, my question is this: does any of this sound ethical? Is it wrong to seek compromise, or am I fundamentally wrong here? I'm reaching the point where either something changes or I walk away for the good of my emotional and mental well-being. Before we get to this week's answer, I want to quickly remind you of this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. Quite often in a lot of my columns and podcasts, I encourage people to seek a polyamory-friendly therapist. And for many people, finding a therapist who knows anything about polyamory can be impossible or out of their budget. BetterHelp allows you to find therapists that you can send messages to at any time of the day, and they also offer some financial aid. You can get 10% off your first month by using the promo code Non-Monogamy Help at checkout or going to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy help. Let's get to this week's answer. There is so much about your question that I relate to. And I haven't really had this problem because I've been in polyam relationships and negotiated that and wanted that from the start. So it's not necessarily the exact same thing. But that feeling of being the comfy pair of slippers, I talked a lot about this in Chill Polyamory's Genevieve, the podcast I Could Never, if you've never heard about it. I talk a lot about that feeling in my podcast episode. It might be helpful for you. But that feeling really sucks. That really sucks. So I just want to say, first and foremost, that I'm really sorry that you're going through that, because that is such a painful and horrible feeling. And I know what that feels like, and I'm really, really sorry that you're going through that. This is not ethical. No, there's nothing ethical about this situation. Whilst if you date someone and they say they're polyamorous, that doesn't inherently mean that the relationship that you're entering with them is a polyamorous relationship. And I really feel like if they're polyamorous, this is the thing. Being polyamorous doesn't necessarily mean you have to pass a course or, get a license or something to operate. And unfortunately, I wish that I could say that if they're polyamorous, they should fucking know better. But really, that's not the case, unfortunately. But I would say that if somebody knows well enough to call themselves polyamorous, it is still going to slightly surprise me that they don't know well enough to negotiate the aspects of relationships before entering into them. And it's not really clear from your letter if, because you said that she was your girlfriend for 5 months and then she kind of invited a long-term male friend to have threesomes with you guys. And that's fine. That's fun. You sound, I don't think you're necessarily polyamorous, but you sound, potentially open to other things, which is fine. But at no point, you said that she identified as polyam before you married, but at what point did she identify as polyam? Did she identify as polyamorous before you met? Did you go into this relationship with any discussion about polyamory, or did she invite someone to have threesomes with? You thought it was kind of like a swingy thing. That's fine. Yeah, there could have been a little bit more discussions about this. But then, as you said, all of a sudden they're asking to have sex separately. And then they're like, oh, it's because we're polyamorous. No, that is not how the situation goes. It's fine if she later on figured out that this was the relationship structure that she would prefer. And it's also fine even if they're not polyamorous, there are open situations with open relationships where people are allowed to sleep with other people without it being a group sex dynamic, without that being a situation or being a problem. But that was not discussed. None of this was discussed with anybody. It was just sort of like, well, and they're asking, this is another reason why I really hate asking for permission. This is an incomplete embodiment of when asking for permission goes wrong. Because the whole thing about asking for permission is that if you agree to a polyamorous relationship from the start, you agree to a relationship where your partner doesn't spend the vast majority of their time with you, where they're free to have other connections and romantic relationships. So you've already consented to that. The reason why they're asking for permission is because you haven't consented to that. And I think that there's an aspect of them that knows it. And this is more than a little gaslighty. Like I don't know the exact way it was done, like to you. So I can't, and obviously, I'm getting one side of it, so I can't fully judge. But to just be like, oh yeah, we're polyamorous. No, there was no discussion of that. You did not agree to that. You did, and you literally said, I had not signed up for this. And then you basically have a choice between losing your partner and somebody that is your friend. And, I don't know what the group sex dynamic was. I don't know if you considered him to be a sexual partner of you, maybe not, but like you lose two connections with this. So you're like being strong-armed into the situation. And that's not fair. There could have been some sort of a discussion. Agreeing to polyamory is a different situation than if you had been in an open relationship and she simply just wanted to sleep with him on her own time. You could have potentially, had that been adequately discussed with you, that's fine. You could have potentially agreed to that. Also, you didn't fucking consent to being his boyfriend. He's your friend. And I'm not saying that, there's different types of connections and that in a polycule everyone has to be dating. But to say, like, there's 4 relationships here, A and B, be it, like, what the fuck? No, you didn't. You're friends. You're friends with him. It doesn't seem like from the way you wrote this letter that you have sex with him. Maybe you do. I don't know. But like, you know what I mean? There's not a relationship between you and him. To say that to you as if you, did you go out on dates with him? Doesn't sound like you did. So to be like, oh, but there are 4 relationships here, that is so fucking gaslighty. That is not the truth. It is not the truth, point blank. And I'm sorry, but you don't get told who you're in a relationship with. That's something that you decide yourself. And that's absolutely unacceptable. This was a group sex sort of 3-way thing. And then they were like, and again, like I said, if she had just simply asked to sleep with him on her own, I don't think that had you been asked about that, you might have had your reservations, but it sounds like you might have been okay with it. But this wasn't what was presented to you. And on top of that, what breaks my fucking heart about your letter is that I say polyamory is not an excuse to find multiple semi-sustaining relationships until you reach a level of permissible stasis. That's not what it's about. And so you are also in this relationship not getting what you need. And nobody's required to kiss anybody or be intimate with anybody at all periods of time, but you are not getting the basic forms of intimacy in a relationship that most people, polyamorous or not, would probably expect. And that's the thing that kind of breaks my heart about this situation. Like, if your wife were loving and caring and intimate and affectionate and sexual with you, I don't think that you would be that bothered by all this. But you're basically being shown a glaring disparity in your relationship, and you're trying to address it. And every time you address it, you get told, oh, you're being controlling. You're not being controlling. This is absolutely unethical. This is totally massively unfair. And I'm not saying, this isn't a tit for tat situation. And this isn't a situation where you kind of are, I don't think you're attempting to be like, oh, you've kissed him 2 times, now you have to kiss me 2 times. It's not like that. But it's going to be very hard for you to be a witness as well. And I wonder if before this person came on the scene, was your girlfriend loving? Did this change when this new person, when did the dynamic between the two of you die away? And you spend most of the year with her and that's fine, but your relationship between each other, has she shown any effort to improve it? Have you brought that up in and of itself without the connection to the other person? Does she address it? Does she pretend like it doesn't exist? Is there a reason for it? I mean, if there's something going on with her, it's very easy to get excited over new people, especially people you don't see all the time. There's a certain sparkly thing about new people. And that's not necessarily your fault. And even if she does, feel that buzzy excitement about a person that she doesn't see that often, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's not necessarily your fault, but that's no excuse to completely and utterly ignore your relationship. And this has been going on for years. And that really breaks my heart. I mean, to answer your question, no, none of this sounds ethical. None of this sounds okay. She's not required to pay attention to you. She's not required to hug and cuddle you and stuff. And that's, but that's not a weird thing to expect or want. And it's also not something that, if you're not getting that, like, even if there wasn't this other guy in the picture, like, to be honest with you, even if she wasn't seeing anybody else, but she just wasn't, there was no intimacy or affectionate. That's the whole point of most relationships. Like, yeah, there are relationships where there's no sex in them and people are fine. And there are ways that people can be intimate without being physically intimate. But if that's something that's important to you, that's valid and that's fine. And even if this other person wasn't in the picture, if you were stuck in a monogamous commitment with somebody who was not willing to show you any kind of affectionate touch or intimacy, I think it's perfectly valid for you to be like, this isn't what I signed up for. That's not what I want out of a relationship. It's not even about him. Like, yeah, there's a whole bit of fucked upness going on. But also the relationship between the two of you is not, there's nothing happening there, Maybe you thought when she asked you to marry her that you'd be her primary partner. And I think you hoped that would come with the intimacy and affection that would generally come with marriage. And if it didn't, then what the hell, man? Like, hierarchy, it's not always ethical. But this is like the classic case of when on the outside it may look like hierarchy, but it's certainly not what's happening on the inside. Absolutely not. I mean, I think you should trust. I think you should trust your own feelings. You say that you feel like they're hell bent on getting their needs met, and you're trying. You are asking. You're not asking for them to, like. It'd be one thing if you were like, I want you to break up with him. I want you to never see him again. You're not even asking for that. You're saying, can we discuss this? Can we negotiate something where maybe you compromise a little bit, but everyone feels comfortable? And they're like, no, you're being controlling. What the hell? I'm gobsmacked, to be honest with you. Like, I can't, this is outrageous. And the thing about other adults, and I've said this before, it's from Matthias Barker, who says a lot of things that I think are great. Don't agree with him on everything, but says a lot of things that I think are great. And one of them is the 3 C's in terms of what you can do about another grown adult's behavior. The 3 C's. 1, you can consent. You can consent to the behavior, accept that it's part of what the situation is. And when you consent to the behavior, by that I don't mean like pretend to consent and bear a grudge. And I don't think you've bared a grudge, actually, which is honestly super fucking grown up about. Like, I'm surprised if you don't have a grudge considering the situation, but the consent isn't really there. Like, you're agreeing to the situation in duress. You're not agreeing to it because you actually want it. You're not accepting this. It's not acceptable for you. So, but that's what consent really means. There is confront. So consent, confront. Confront means what you've done. Confront the situation, ask for it to change. And that's an important step, because there are some times where some people expect people to read their minds, or they don't explicitly ask for what they want. And you have done that. It seems like you have explicitly asked for what you want. And I might consider suggesting couples therapy, but the thing about couples therapy is that it can actually be really damaging. I would suggest you read Why Does He Do That by Lindsay Bancroft. Very much suggest you read that book. I'm not saying necessarily that your partner is being abusive, because I don't know enough about this dynamic. But that book is really, really eye-opening, because in that book, there's also ways to help people who are in abusive relationships, which might, you don't have to be in an abusive relationship, I think, to get value out of the book. And one of the things that Lindsay Bancroft talks about is about how couples therapy can actually be worse for, couples therapy works on the premise that both of the people in that couple are wanting to improve the relationship and have, they're in good faith, basically. And an abusive dynamic is not in good faith. And so sometimes that the therapy, when they go into typical couples therapy, it can reinforce the abusive behaviors. So I don't think I would recommend that, because the fact that you're asking for what you want, you're making it clear, and you're like it's hard. Again, I don't know the fullness of the situation. I'm getting one side of it. but it feels very gaslighty. Just being like, we're polyamorous, or you're being controlling. Like, this doesn't feel like a situation that would benefit from couples therapy, to be all honest, to be like as honest as I can about the vibe I get, but I could be wrong. But you have tried confronting the situation, and you could try seeing if you can find a couples therapy that also deals with abusive dynamics and maybe can recognize that. But I think that you've done pretty much all you can to confront the situation. And so the only thing that's left is cut yourself out of the situation, because you cannot control another grown adult's behavior. You really can't. And from my perspective, from what I can read about the situation, does not seem like you're being controlling. It doesn't really seem like polyamory is necessarily what you want, but there could have been dynamics about this that could have been negotiated, or, you clearly don't want it, and somebody just kind of bulldozing over you. It's not really okay. This isn't what you want. If this isn't what you want, then I think you need to stand up for yourself a little bit more in this situation and, make it clear, this is not what I want. And you're not, again, this, because in this situation, I could see why you would want to say, hey, you have to break up. Like, you can sleep with other people, but not this person, because obviously this is a sort of poisoned well. But like, you're not even asking for, I don't know if you're asking for that. It doesn't seem like you're asking for that. You literally said negotiate a dynamic where everyone compromises a bit so that everyone feels comfy. So you're not even asking for that. If you had asked for that, then I would have said, okay, it's fair for someone to call you controlling a little bit, but you're not even asking for that. So I don't know. To answer the question, no, it doesn't sound ethical. And no, you're not wrong to seek a compromise. Wanting a compromise, but I wonder if there is a compromise in this situation, because it doesn't seem like they're willing to give up anything. And it's so fucking rude. Some of the shit you've described, like, if people want to spend time, like, imagine, I think one good thing as well to help you reframe this is, imagine if you were on vacation with some friends. Like, if you're on vacation with two friends and, it's fine if they want to spend time on their own to hang out. Like, that's fine. Generally speaking, if you go out on a vacation with two other people, you kind of want to hang out all together. Like, that's the fucking point of going on a vacation with three of it. But if for whatever reason, two people wanted to spend time alone, I just feel like, and I wonder how they made it clear that you weren't invited. Like, 'cause it's okay. Like, if you're all on holiday together and they're like, hey, we want to do this activity. We'd like to do it just the two of us. Is that all right? Like, would you be okay with that? We've scheduled this other activity that you can do, or here's some ideas of something you can do. Like, that's okay. I wouldn't be like, if I went, I'm thinking like, I have two friends who are married, and if we all went on a holiday together and there was like some sort of romantic thing they want to do together. I mean, yeah, we're not all date, but you know what I mean? In a friendship context, even, I could understand. But if they like hinted, like, we're going to do this, and they sort of like hinted that I wasn't invited, that would be annoying, even if it was just my friends, or like just friends, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if there were no romantic elements involved, that'd be fucking rude. So that'd be rude. So I just think, yeah, there's just so many things about this. And if they want to go on holiday alone, but like, do you have holidays with her? Like, anyway, I'm going on and on because I just feel really bad for your situation. I think that this is massively unfair and totally unethical and just not fucking on, to be blunt. Yeah, to sum up, yeah, it's unfair. Polyamory is not something that should be sprung on you. You should have had a discussion about this. Making comparisons, it's hard for you not to make comparisons between you and this other person. And the fact that your relationship with her is not even a satisfying relationship is a huge issue. And even if that guy wasn't there, even if there wasn't that whole other issue, the relationship that you have between you would be a huge issue. And I just think you need to think about 3 C's. What have you done so far? See a therapist on your own. If you're not seeing a therapist on your own, especially, like, can be really, really hard for men. Men don't always have those social connections, the same social connections women have. And you absolutely can find those social connections. And so don't feel isolated. And I know it can be hard sometimes as well if, like, men have kind of been socially conditioned to see, it not being cool to talk about their feelings and things like that. If you don't have a therapist, please definitely consider seeing a therapist, because it's going to be really, really helpful for you to analyze the situation with as well. I'm really glad that you wrote me me about it. But I definitely think see a therapist and talk about this as well with them. But yeah, this is not helpful, or like this is not ethical. If it helps to have someone tell you that, this is not from what you've described, this is not an ethical situation in my opinion. So I genuinely hope that helps, and good luck. Thank you for listening to episode 167 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. If you want to be awesome, you can sign up to support what I do by going to Non-Monogamy Help for non-monogamy. Good Lord, have mercy. nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe, and you can sign up to the podcast support tier. That gives me a little extra money. My current podcast shout-out supporters are Ermi, Mike Kander, and Matthias Caden. If for whatever reason you can't support economically, because I understand, there's a free tier you can sign up to at the same address, or if you want to sign up to emails on Wednesday to get everything a little bit earlier and to get like discounts and stuff like that, you can go to nonmonogamyhelp.com/email, and you can take a screenshot of the podcast and share it to your stories on social media. Do tag me. You can also rate and review the podcast on any podcast platform, but mainly Spotify and iTunes. I was going to say Spotitunes. Spotitunes. I need to go to bed. All right, that's up for this week. You'll get a new column next Friday and another podcast episode in a fortnight. Spotitunes. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. The music was done by Chris Albury Jones at albury-jones.com. Thank you for listening.